Now we go into crimes against typography. Why bad typography exists? These are just 5 of what I could think about of why bad typography exists. And you might be guilty of these things, which I may not be accusing you of, but these things do happen, and I just want to point them out. Double spaces after sentences. I know that a lot of writers do this.
Aren't we supposed to?
It was MLA for a long time.
Huh?
It was MLA for a long time.
Really?
Yeah.
It's APA.
Well,
yeah.
The reason why it's wrong is because
design reasons.
Is because having an extra space causes the brain to stall for an unnecessary amount of time, which would cause you to lose your audience. Okay. This is speaking from a design point of view. Okay, when people read stuff, this also creates holes in the white space of your paragraph, which is not aesthetically pleasing at the least. So there's these things when people justify their type, which is going from the left side to the right side, right? It creates these white lines if you kind of like, squint your eyes. And these things are actually called rivers. And you want to really avoid those kinds of things because it just does not look good on a page. You're usually going to concentrate on the white against the black. So those are, double spaces kind of really create these things when you justify type. Second one is a lack of scale. There's a theory that the larger type, the more attention it grabs. This is partially true, but only in the same way that ugly things grab a lot of attention. In my experience, nearly everyone sets their type too big. It must be legible, but the fonts set too large cause the mind to process it slower, which could cause you to lose your audience as well. And third one, which I totally made the mistake of doing, is our audience are widows and orphans. Appropriately named, widows are single words that exist alone on the last line of a paragraph, and orphans live by themselves on the first line of a page. So, fortunately, this is a widow. Okay? Right. An orphan would be if this thing were to still live up there by itself. Okay? So, yeah. They create visual holes in text, slow text, which again cause you to lose your audience. So save these poor souls by slightly increasing your column width or editing your text to fit them on the previous line. Number 4, it's computer style. People think that fonts are like silly putty. They can stretch, expand, condense the letter form at their will, when each curved letter was made for a specific purpose. You know who you are. And the 5th one is no kerning.
But yes, we kern.
Yes.
No, we can't.
Because every letter is shaped differently, too much or too little space between the letters is often created. The computer doesn't do that for you, unless it dances as well as makes the sandwich for you.
Sweet.
Yeah, so that's what I
One day.
One day. So these are different examples. These are the things that I mentioned, the examples of them. So this is the double space, right? This is, I think, scale.
Too big, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Scale.
This is the orphan, and this is condensed type. And this is when things aren't kerned correctly. They're like bad tea, right?
Oh.
So those things you have to be careful about.
But that wouldn't happen though if you're typing on a computer, right?
It does happen. You
Depending on
look
the
carefully.
type.
Next time you type up something, things aren't always equal. They're not as bad as this, but they do have different spaces.
Is that why, like, when you're on Microsoft Word and then you try to like type something, let's say it's okay, anyways. Well, it happens where I'm trying to write a list, and then sometimes it like the list, the first letter of each, it like shifts by like just slightly, and it looks weird.
Yes, because Word is mathematically trying to do these things with spaces and like big, either capital letters. They're given a certain number by which everything is like, taken care of. So designers have to go back in and either widen it or make it smaller. But because it's on a grand scale and people don't want to take the time to do that, programs like Word try to facilitate that kind of thing.
Should we not use Word?
The new word's pretty good.
I've never used it.
Boycott it.
Never use Word?
I haven't used Word for many. Well, no, I haven't used Word extensively for many years.
Texting, it's like a drug.
Yeah.
How about like Google, like Gmail or something? Do they cur? I mean, like internet typing, like.
I don't think so. After, below a certain point size, I don't know if kerning is worth doing.
Right.
It's mostly for big type, when you will notice that things. Next time you read a billboard, look at the spaces between each letter. And then, because I always look at it and I'm like, oh, you can make it tighter or something like that. So.
Why don't they make programs that just do it for you instead of make it ugly?
Just like.
It makes me mad. It's like we're getting
because
gypped.
they're trying to fit the biggest audience, and a very small percentage are designers, and that's again why there's bad typography out there. Can you be a typographer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you
Yes,
can.
you heard.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. The rules of type are made to act as guidelines to the basics of design. Once you have mastered them appropriately, feel free to break them. The most important rules of typography is that content is king, and typography is queen. So dress her up appropriately. Number 2, be careful with the types you hang out with, especially that Comic Sans.
Yeah.
Have a grid to which things are aligned to, because things that aren't gridded just look a little bit off, and it doesn't make the viewer think that you really thought this design through.
What's a grid? For those who don't know.
When you have in some programs there are rulers that line the left side and the top. You can click and drag lines down so that these things will align. So if you want to start an indentation, you can drag this body here and it'll line up to maybe an E or something, So if you consider those things, your design or your page will look more fluid or have some sort of a better sense of space. So those are grids. Have a hierarchy in messaging, and choose an appropriate voice for your message. So based on those things, you can be a typographer. Now, for the dear why does bad type happen to good people? Yours truly, Comic Fans. Alright, ready? Dear Comic Fans, thank you so much for pointing this out. This is such a complex issue because does bad type just happen, or is it inherent in our humanness? We have to go to the core of the issue. Sin. Obviously, we are human, and when given a choice between good and bad type, we'll often choose bad type. Now, having that there are people who live in the world of bad type, what more can one do than to follow bad typography, right? It is in our nature to make bad typography. We are predisposed to bad type because we live in a bad world, and we're saturated with bad type. To say that bad type happens to good people assumes that people are naturally good, and the choices that they make are good. Here is where we have to understand that man is not good and cannot make good choices without an example of good typography, especially from a good designer.
The designers are.
But who is the best designer? That's right, you guessed it, God. The greatest and most perfect designer in the world. He used the word to create, and through typography, it came to being.
Indeed.
Of course, we don't see the physical world as words per se, but there you have it. God is a typographer. He sets words into place and it functions accordingly and appropriately. This is something we can accept as the standard of what is good. Other things are merely imitations of what good design is. Understanding that God wants us to choose good type over bad type. He redeemed his design and provided us the ability to make good typography. Of course, once and again, we're tempted to use bad typography. That is the constant battle with the flesh. But until we are perfected, you have the ability to choose good typography over bad. In closing, I'm not saying that Comic Sans is evil, but how you use Comic Sans may very well be. Yours truly, John. So tonight, in following our tradition, we're showing the movie Stranger Than Fiction.
Yay.
So, oh sorry. Now questions.
Do you,
You should have an altar.
you want to make a commitment to good
Oh
type?
yeah. If you want to commit to be a good typographer today,
We'll close our eyes.
Those of you who promise not to use
raise your hand.
sans serif fonts inappropriately.
We'll say this prayer together.
So where I forgot if you talked about this last time, but where did Comic Sans come from?
You know, maybe the devil. I don't know. I'll do
Gates?
research for you, and then
There's a YouTube video with an interview of the guy who created Comic Sans.
Oh really?
Like they do a whole thing about
Is he
the
suicidal?
downfall of Comic Sans, and he like defends it and talks about what it was originally supposed to be used for, and then it's really interesting.
Maybe that will be my next lecture.
Wait,
Yeah.
what's its origin? Is there a comic with,
Comic Sans with?
Sans
or just
serif.
just pretty much just comic?
Because didn't you say Comic Sans was...
With
was
the
for
Sarah
comic?
comic.
Yeah, so it's appropriate for that kind of thing.
No, is there a comic?
Oh, is
Like
there
not
a
Comic
Not
Sans,
Comic
Oh,
Sans, just
but
comic.
but comic with
Is there a
serifs.
comic?
A comic with serifs?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Oh yeah. Wait, like cause I bought
Because
I'm
serifs are very
embarrassed to
formal,
admit this.
and
Wait, smiles, I want to hear this.
I bought Twilight the graphic novel. Let me record you.
No,
Say it again. Say it again. Say what you just
You
said.
bought what?
I got Twilight the graphic novel and all the typography. Get this thing out of my face.
I think we need to do it.
The typography is that probably the weakest part of the book, though. Is that it uses the serif font. It's totally awesome. No.
I think Miles needs to do a Twilight LAAF. Team Edward or Team Jacob on
they
it.
probably took it from the book, right? Because I'm pretty sure that the book is written in a serif font.
I remember reading the reviews on Amazon. One of the big complaints was that they said the typography was uninspired, and they were complaining about the use of a serif font in the comic.
That's terrible.
It took away the voice of each character.
See, there's voice.
I have so many questions for you, We'll talk about it later.
Fun.
Isn't a typeface very subjective in terms of? I guess you can make the argument for like art and all this, etc., but let's say everybody used Comic Sans, and that was just the Times Roman, and everything was set like that since the printing press or whatever.
Okay.
Then, do you know what I mean? Like, how do you say
That. So you're saying type is relative
relative?
Well, to the
based
culture.
to the culture.
Right.
Isn't it then?
Yeah, because serif fonts could have looked different, you know,
Yeah.
in a different world.
Well, aesthetics is
I think
culturally based.
Yeah.
yeah, and type was originally created to be legible. If that was the case with Comic Sans and everyone read like that, like in Comic Land, then yes, it would be.
Well, I mean,
Here's
our
the opposite.
handwriting has completely changed over
Right.
the course of 200
Well,
years.
Here's a more realistic version of that question. Like, so what if we had started with sans serif fonts, right? So sans serif fonts were sort of the norm. They were in all the newspapers. They were the official documents. They were in the original printing press, right? Then perhaps we would think of that as more formal, and serif fonts as like this quirky little weird thing we do.
That's true. I think contextually, it gives a lot of meaning. And when for example, like fonts that have, for example, I think like the company Bulgari, you know that it's a V, right? You ever wonder why it's a V?
Yes.
From the Romans.
It's because these were actually stonecutters who did it, and the roundedness was actually not a very easy thing for you to stone
But the B has
How
a
they do-
round.
Yeah.
Later on.
This is
This is what I've been told.
Detail